Right, here we are. It's called Getting There, and it's about going to the moon, but it's also getting there in terms of, this is the start of a major story. So it's written up as a competition entry. It will go into Stampex at some point. It probably won't do brilliantly well, but it'll be all right. Introduction, plan of exhibit, and main references. And one of them I've actually named Umberto as a reference. We start off with the famous stamp, the first space adhesive, and this is Fort Bliss, which is a main rocket producing centre in the United States. And that really in many ways is the start of this story, where the German rocket scientists had been captured, brought across and made to work for the Americans. So we have the first two covers, a nice cover signed by John Glenn, who I'm sure most of you will have heard of, the first American to orbit the Earth in his Mercury craft. So you've got the Mercury program first. And then we go on next to the Gemini program, to Apollo. And there is a famous man signing the bottom underneath the logo, Michael Collins, who of course was on the first moon flight with John Young. This is one of the Gemini flights. And a little summary of Project Gemini, which comes before the first of the Apollo manned missions. And there's the first Apollo manned mission, Apollo 7. Again, signed by one of the pilots and by John Healey. Now, John Healey was an important man. He was in charge of, he was the flight controller, the NASA flight controller for this mission. And then a splashdown cover from Apollo 7. The next bit is testing. The next ones, Apollo 8 and Apollo 9, were all about testing all of the different things in space conditions. So all kinds of tests of all of the computers and all of the bits they needed to land on the moon. So Apollo 8 and Apollo 9. Now you see this Paul Kelly signature. He was an artist, and he was the artist for the space program, really. And he designed this stamp. This stamp is the Mercury stamp. And it's used there on an Apollo mission. Kelly signed an awful lot of covers. You'll see his signature quite a bit. And then a special postal stationery item for the first lunar module separation in space. The great event here, this is the moon landing one. So we have the moon landing itself, we have the lunar orbit one first, and then on to the touchdown and the planting of the flag. And the two famous stamps, well, the one famous stamp in two shades. Again, this is Kelly's work, the first man on the moon, and you'll see that stamp quite a lot. Going on from there, how dangerous a job this was. You have Apollo 12, which nearly came to grief but didn't quite. Hit by lightning just as it took off, but it carried on, and the whole of the mission was carried out. The lightning apparently only damaged some sensors. And then of course Apollo 13, which was the great story made into a feature film, when there was an explosion. It was an oxygen cylinder ruptured, and of course they used the moon as a sort of slingshot to get back to Earth, and most people will have heard that story. So you've got an orbit of the moon cover as well. Further afield on the moon is the next one, And this, of course, is using the lunar rover, this vehicle, which meant they could get about. But before that, I wanted to show you this particular stamp because those of you who know me know I'm interested in golf. I know it's Ras Al Khaimah and you're not supposed to use Ras Al Khaimah stamps, but it's the only stamp that shows the famous Alan Shepard golf shot on the moon, which I wanted to include in this. So that's Apollo 14. And then 15 is the rover one, the first use of the lunar rover. And there it is on an American pair of stamps. The Americans don't produce very many space stamps, but there's one there alongside the end of the survey. This was the longest stay so far, but as the Apollo missions got longer and longer, they did more and more things, and they brought back some huge chunks of space rock. And they did an enormous number of experiments. So we're now up to Apollo 16 and Apollo 17. Quite a scarce one. It's quite a scarce cover, that one. At the end of Apollo 17. And then the last bit of the story, the last bit of the Skylab, when the last of the Saturn V rockets was used, and then which was blasted into orbit by the Saturn V. Then the Saturn 1Bs were brought back to get the crew up there. And of course the last thing is the Apollo Soyuz linking together. I notice we're up to 7 minutes, I better shut up. The Apollo Soyuz and the Russian commemorative stamps for that. So, the end of the story? Well, not really. We shall see. But there we are. It's a small effort at an Astrophilately exhibit. For those judges amongst you, yes, I know it's a very big subject for one frame. There's a lot of it. But the Astrophilatelists don't seem to mind that. They don't seem to be as bothered with their one frames and the size of the subject. They just like the coverage. But, well, we'll see how it goes. My Astrophilately exhibit. I don't think I'd hold my breath for the next one. But I quite enjoy doing it, and it looks quite pretty.